Hey, it's the third week in the Tessa Quilt Along. We're going to start piecing our quilt top this week. I broke this part into 2 weeks just to give you plenty of time. I usually piece the first half of my quilt, like the upper left-hand diagonal side and then the lower side, and then sew them together. So I finished my first quilt top last week, and I'm going to start my second one this week. So I'm going to share a few tips with you right here, and then I'll be sharing some in my stories on Instagram this week as I make my other quilt. So let me show you a few things that will help you when you piece your quilt top. So first of all, when you are sewing your quilt, I made the lap size, and I finished my quilt top last week. So I'm just going to show you a few things that came to mind while I was working on it that might be useful. This is a fabric A piece, and this is the fabric K piece. This is the upper left-hand corner of the quilt, and you want to make sure that this piece is centered over this, since there's not a seam anywhere to line things up. If you fold this in half before you pin them and crease it with your finger, and then fold this in half and crease it, when you line those creases up and then finish pinning, it will help center this over the quilt. The most awkward part is going to be sewing these pieces that are only going to go halfway on here, but I just sew starting at the bottom, and then I usually pin all the pieces I want to sew and then just run them through my machine without breaking the thread. That's why there's a seam here. You don't need to have that if you don't do that way, but it'll just go halfway, and then when we trim our quilt later, this part will get trimmed off, so it doesn't really matter what you do in that part of the quilt. So other than that, I don't think the piecing there's anything weird or crazy about the piecing. The hardest part is just keeping track of everything. I like to line things up after I piece blocks, or just go slowly and do one row at a time so that I don't get anything mixed up. One other thing I forgot to mention, on every other seam other than that top one, you'll have at some point on the seam, there won't be a lot of seams that need to match. Notice, like on this seam right here, there's nothing, and then right here you have these ones, this one. Make sure to pin at every intersection where you have a seam, and because even having this, see, this one is just a tiny bit off, it looks so much better when it is nice and straight. So I mean, overall, that's not going to be the end of the world, but you want to get it as close as you can. And one way to do that is to make sure you pin, even though these are really close together, I pin at both of them.